A lone figure sat hunched beside a dwindling fire, shadows swallowing his outline. Snowflakes drifted silently, masking the hunger etched into his hollow frame. Then, from the tree line, a shape emerged, silent, deliberate, primal. Yellow eyes glowed, fixed on him. It wasn't a deer or stray dog, it was a wolf. Each step sank into the powder, slow, deliberate, as if testing the silence itself. The man froze, his breath visible in short bursts, hands trembling but unmoving. He had nothing to defend himself with, not even the strength to run. Every heartbeat echoed like thunder in his ears. Wolves did not walk alone, and yet this one did. No growl, no rush, just a quiet stare as the fire cracked once, throwing sparks into the air. The wilderness held its breath as predator and prey faced each other across the glow. The man had lived weeks on scraps, foraging in bins behind forgotten towns, walking endless roads that led nowhere. His world had shrunk to survival, cold, hunger, and silence. Tonight, though, even silence carried weight. His stomach twisted from emptiness, but fear knotted tighter. Wolves were hunters of precision, killers by nature. Yet this one did not lunge. It stood, watching, as though uncertain of its role in the script fate had written. The man's mind raced. Was this creature starving too? Was it circling, waiting for weakness? His eyes traced the outlines of its fur, matted, scarred, streaked with frost. In that stillness, predator and wanderer looked like mirrors of one another, both displaced, both outcasts, both shadows wandering in a world that had forgotten them. But survival left little room for trust, and hunger devoured all boundaries.
He lowered his gaze to the tattered satchel at his side. Inside, a crust of bread remained, hard as stone, salvaged some days earlier. His fingers lingered on it, trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of decision. To eat was to live another day. To share was madness. Yet the wolf's eyes followed his every movement, unblinking, patient. He remembered nights when strangers ignored him, when even a morsel was withheld. That memory pressed against him now. The fire cracked again, a burst of sparks flying upward as if urging him to act. He broke the bread slowly, painfully, his dry hands trembling. The wolf's ears twitched, its paws shifted against the snow. It hadn't moved closer, but the tension was undeniable. A line stretched between them, fragile as ice on a thawing river. He knew one wrong move could shatter it. The man held the bread fragment. His throat burned with need. His ribs ached beneath his tattered coat. He raised it halfway to his lips, instinct screaming to devour it. But then his arm froze. The wolf had lowered itself onto its haunches, sitting, eyes fixed, waiting. Something in that stillness unnerved him more than fangs ever could. This wasn't an attack. This was a test. He swallowed hard. He had begged once, felt the sting of being denied. Now, in some cruel reversal, the power rested in his shaking hands. The firelight reflected in the wolf's eyes, two small flames trapped in amber orbs. He broke the bread once more, smaller now, and extended his palm. For a moment, silence ruled the world. Snow fell heavier, smothering sound. And then the wolf shifted forward, one paw sinking deeper into the snow.
The wolf's advance was slow, deliberate. Each step pressed the snow until it cracked under weight. The man's pulse surged, his body begging him to withdraw, yet he remained still, arm outstretched. The crust trembled in his palm. The wolf's breath curled into the freezing air, warm clouds colliding with the man's own shallow exhales. One step closer, another. Its ears flicked forward, nose twitching. He had never been this close to wildness before, raw, untamed, ancient. For the first time, he noticed the creature wasn't large, not the monstrous predator his imagination had conjured. Its ribs showed faintly beneath the thick fur, the hollow of hunger etched into its frame. Their eyes locked, unblinking. The bread was a bridge neither had crossed before. And in that fragile moment, the man realized something dangerous. Trust was as deadly as teeth. The wolf stopped just short of his hand. Its nose quivered, breath warm against his frozen skin. He dared not move, not a twitch. The bread sat between them, suspended in time. Then, with startling swiftness, the wolf snatched it, retreating 2 steps, crunching the crust in its powerful jaws. The man gasped, not from pain, but from awe. No strike, no blood, just the sound of chewing in the silent snow. He lowered his trembling hand, both relieved and bewildered. That fragment had cost him his tomorrow. Yet watching the wolf, he felt no anger. Instead, a strange calm settled, a recognition that survival, no matter the form, was shared. The wolf licked its muzzle, watching him still. Hunger remained, unsatisfied, but something invisible had shifted. Not victory, not defeat, something far stranger.
The firelight flickered, shrinking lower. Shadows stretched, dancing across the clearing. The man huddled close, pulling his threadbare coat tighter, while the wolf lingered at the edge of glow. It could have left, vanished back into darkness, but it didn't. Instead, it sat, tail curling around its body, eyes fixed on him with unsettling patience. Hours seemed to melt into silence. The man's body screamed for sleep, but his mind could not release the tension. He had lived among humans who betrayed, abandoned, and forgot him. Yet here sat a predator, refusing to harm, refusing to leave. His eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. But before surrendering to dreams, a chilling thought crept in. Wolves never traveled alone. If this one lingered, what shadows in the forest might already be circling unseen? The night deepened, stars hidden behind a curtain of clouds. Snow thickened, muffling every sound. The fire collapsed into embers, casting a faint glow. Then, without warning, the wolf shifted. One paw slid forward, then another. It crossed into the last ring of firelight, no longer a phantom, but a presence. Its eyes glimmered less like threat, more like question. The man tensed, every muscle braced for teeth. Instead, the wolf curled down onto the snow, its chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Side by side, predator and wanderer shared the dying warmth of firelight. The man's hands trembled, unsure if this was safety or temptation. Sleep pressed against him like a heavy tide, and for the first time in months, he felt less alone, though he dared not admit it. The line between trust and danger blurred with every heartbeat.
Dawn approached as a pale bruise along the horizon, the sky bruised violet over a world of ice. The man's fire had surrendered to ash, leaving only a mild exhale of smoke. He felt emptiness gnaw like a small, patient animal in his gut. The wolf rose, shook snow from its coat in a spray of glimmering crystals, and paced the edge of the clearing. It didn't circle him like prey. It surveyed, listening to secrets the forest whispered only to creatures born to it. The man tested his legs, needles of cold prickling his feet. He had no plan, no destination, yet the path felt chosen. When the wolf paused and angled its head toward the trees, the man understood the invitation without words. He gathered his satchel, breath thin, heart stranger calm, and stepped after the animal into a living labyrinth of frost. The forest tightened around them, trunks like dark pillars, branches heavy with snow. Every footfall cracked a quiet code beneath his boots. The wolf glided ahead, unhurried, pausing when he lagged, moving when he moved. Hunger pressed against his thoughts, but movement became a different kind of heat, a rhythm fighting off stillness's lethality. He noticed details he once ignored: birdless branches, absence of small tracks, the hush that follows scarcity. The wolf stopped at a frozen creek, its surface glazed like smoked glass. The animal sniffed, pawed lightly, then crossed over with fluid confidence. The man followed, steps tentative, testing each patch for treachery. Wind shifted, sliding a ribbon of colder air through the trees. The world tasted of iron and pine. No promises had been made between them, yet the distance from fear to faith shortened, step by careful step.
By midday, the light sharpened, a brittle beam scattering off crusted snow. The man's lungs burned, but a strange steadiness anchored his chest. The wolf slowed near a stand of deadfall, where branches knitted into a low shelter. The place offered a small reprieve from the wind, its mouth facing south, its back armored by ancient trunks. He knelt and cleared snow with numb hands, breath clouding in ragged bursts. The wolf watched without impatience, tail still, ears tracking the forest's hidden script. He found a tin can in his pack, dented and stubborn, the last echo of a meal. No opener, just hope and frozen fingers. A flat rock and a rusted nail from a broken fence post became tools. Persistence did the rest. Metal surrendered. He stared into thin beans and cold fat, a feast only desperation can bless. Evening arrived early, dragging a blue curtain across the woods. He arranged kindling like fragile ribs and coaxed breath into spark, while the wolf lay at the threshold, neither inside nor fully away, guarding a boundary that felt sacred. The fire found life, small and stubborn, its glow painting the shelter's wood in amber. He rationed the beans, counting spoonfuls as if counting heartbeats. An hour folded into calm, tension thinned. Then a sound unfurled from the dark, a layered call, high and mournful, answered by another, nearer, then a third, closer still. The wolf's head lifted, ears pricked, body tensing like a drawn bow. The man's body remembered fear with ruthless precision. Pack meant rules, hierarchy, and hunger big enough to have a voice. The night held its breath again, but this time the breath had teeth.
The calls rose and fell like a tide, a language of distances the man could only feel, not translate. The wolf stood, shoulders squared, tail lowered in alert restraint. No snarl, no panic, just readiness, quiet and complete. The man banked the flames to a hush to keep smoke from betraying their position. He moved slower than fear begged, careful with every ember. The shelter shrank around him. He listened not just with his ears, but with skin and nerves and marrow, mapping the forest through vibration. The howls faded, replaced by the faint groan of trees shifting under cold. The wolf did not leave. It settled again, but this time facing outward, body aligned with the mouth of the shelter, as if covering a doorway to a home it didn't own. The man felt protected by something that owed him nothing. Hours trickled like meltwater through stone. Sleep grazed him, then withdrew, returning in thin veils he couldn't hold. In those brief drifts, fragments of another life surfaced, a kitchen lamp casting honeyed light, a laugh in a warmer season, a hallway filled with framed moments. Loss lives in the details. He woke to the small sound of snow shedding from branches, a breath of relief in a heavy night. The wolf stretched, joints cracking softly, then shook off frost again. The man tested his limbs, stiff and complaining, grateful for complaints that meant life continued. He added slivers of wood to the ember bed, made fire without the ritual of hope this time, simply because he could. The forest, momentarily merciful, allowed quiet to return. And in quiet, he noticed something he had missed, a line of old scars along the wolf's flank.
At dawn's blue edge, he coaxed the wolf closer with nothing but stillness. The animal obliged by inches, drawn by warmth, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the fragile treaty between two hungers. Frost clung in feathered patterns to its fur, but beneath the ruff, along the ribline, scar tissue lifted like pale seams stitched by winter. Not one, but many, some thin and old, others wider, newer, winding toward the hind leg. The story wrote itself in ridges, traps, fights, survival paid in flesh. His own scars answered beneath his coat, hospital white, alley black, the kinds of marks no one celebrates. The mirror felt undeniable. This wasn't a monster. This was a survivor. The revelation didn't erase caution, but it diluted terror into understanding. Trust, he realized, is not a gift. It is a wound that learns to close without forgetting pain. With daylight returned, they moved. The wolf led toward higher ground where pines huddled thicker and wind cut less fiercely. He followed footprints pressed like coins into snow, each track a promise he hadn't known to ask for. Hunger stayed, but now it traveled beside him rather than inside him. The scar image wouldn't release his mind. He imagined cold steel, a snapped snare, a fight under moonlight, a retreat that cost more blood than pride. The wolf's gait favored the hind leg, subtle but constant. The man shifted his path to flatter terrain whenever he could, as if such small concessions could be offerings to a god that doesn't bargain. When they rested, he shared a final mouthful, not because it made sense, but because it made meaning. The wolf accepted without haste, then set its head down near his boots, choosing proximity over instinct. Clouds gathered, full-bellied and gray, smearing the sky. Snow would return, thicker, blinder. He scanned for shelter and saw a low cut in the hill, a natural hollow half hidden by branches. They pressed into it, an alcove of stone with a ceiling of tangled roots. He stacked fallen limbs to brace a windbreak. The wolf settled inside the curve of the space, a crescent of cautious calm. He found a shred of plastic in his pack, garbage elevated to armor, stretched across gaps to hold warmth. Fire felt unlikely here, smoke a risk in still air. So they leaned into the heat of bodies and the hum of breath. A strange gratitude swelled, not for comfort, but for not being alone with discomfort. In the hush, he felt sleep take him whole, a rare, deep surrender, stitched with the thread of acceptance. He woke to a sound that didn't fit the forest's grammar, snow compacting under unfamiliar rhythm, brittle and too precise. He eased forward, peering through the rootwork. Two silhouettes moved along the ridgeline, bundled in bright jackets, strides swift, voices clipped by distance. Humans. He tasted danger, not from bullets or teeth, but from entitlement, from the way people claim and categorize what they don't understand. He could call out for help, trade the wild's uncertainty for an answer shaped by rules. Instead, he remained still, breath shallow, trusting the quiet. The wolf rose, eyes on him, not the hikers, as if reading his choice before he made it. The figures passed, oblivious, their trail cutting across the snow like a neat scar. When they vanished, the forest swelled back, and he understood he had chosen this story on purpose.
Afternoon light thinned to pewter. He finally built a small fire, coaxed within the hollow's protection. Smoke filtered through a sieve of roots. He warmed his hands and felt sensation return as pins and needles, a painful blessing. The wolf edged closer to the heat, stopping where flame light kissed its paws but not more. He arranged kindling with ritual care, refusing waste. The growl of his own stomach became background noise. He had learned to live with need as a permanent roommate. He parted the last of his calories between them, measuring by instinct rather than math. The wolf ate slowly, without frenzy, chewing with that same controlled gravity. Respect seemed to grow not from generosity, but from restraint, their capacity to remain themselves while sharing something neither could spare. Dusk slid down the slope like a velvet curtain, and they watched it fall together. Night stamped out the edges of the world. Wind found them anyway, threads of cold stitching through the hollow. He tucked his knees to his chest and drew his coat tighter. The wolf shifted, then settled with its back near his shins, a circle of heat anchoring him to the living. He studied the flicker of embers until images formed, streets that used to know his footsteps, names that once answered to his voice. Loss is an erosion so slow you mistake it for weather. In the quiet, though, he felt a different certainty rising, small, unglamorous, irrefutable. He had not been saved, he had adapted. The wolf had not been tamed, it had chosen. Those two truths rested side by side like sleeping animals, wary but companionable. Somewhere beyond the trees, civilization thrummed indifferent. Here, breath and warmth were enough.
Morning cracked open with brittle sunlight. He stepped from the hollow and found the world repainted. Snow glazed with a brightness that hurt the eyes, icicles burning like glass. Tracks littered the slope, rabbit, fox, something heavier moving distant. The wolf ranged ahead, nose scribing invisible maps, reading a library of scents written during the night. He followed slower, savoring the rhythm of motion. Hunger hummed but didn't dictate. At a small rise, he paused to breathe and watched the wolf crest the ridge, a silhouette cut clean against a stainless sky. When the animal turned its head back, he felt that thread of connection hold taut, neither leash nor chain. Below the ridge, a narrow path unwound, a corridor of compressed steps leading toward a frozen pond. He considered risk, then followed, trusting both the wolf and the day's stern mercy. On the far edge of the pond, a figure crouched behind a fallen birch, phone lifted, elbows locked. The stranger wore a knit hat and carried a pack much newer than the man's dreams. The wolf sensed it first, freezing mid-step, body a taut line between flight and fight. The man turned and caught only a sliver of movement, the flash of a lens, the reflex of capture. He understood the world had 1,000 eyes, and none of them knew his name. The phone tracked from wolf to man to empty sky, recording a myth being born without permission. He thought of shouting, of erasing the moment from someone else's memory. Instead, he lowered his hands, letting the lens see what it wanted. 2 lives stitched by hunger and restraint. Later, that choice would echo far past the tree line.
The stranger withdrew, vanishing along a path the man hadn't noticed. The forest swallowed the intrusion as if embarrassed. He focused on the wolf again, on the way its attention eased once movement stopped. At the pond's rim, he knelt and carved a shallow hole with a flat stone, coaxing water through the ice's cracked lip. He cupped melting cold in his palms, letting it sting life back into gums and throat. The wolf drank from the same thin spill, careful not to jostle him, the choreography of shared thirst, precise and unspoken. Overhead, a raft of cloud shifted, dimming the light to a softer blade. He felt the moment stretch long enough to become memory, a frame inside his mind's own archive. He did not understand why the world insisted on witnesses. He only knew this scene needed none. By evening, he sensed a change, not in weather, but in the air around his story. The path they took seemed lighter, as if footsteps could float on attention. Somewhere, rooms of strangers' faces leaned toward screens, eyes wet, arguments brewing, hearts rearranging themselves into kinder patterns. He couldn't know the captions or the stitched reactions, couldn't hear the chorus overlapping with certainty and doubt. But he felt the tug of something larger drawing near. Concern dressed as ownership, kindness dressed as control, curiosity dressed as rescue. The wolf ignored all invisible crowds, pausing only when the man paused, moving when he moved. The forest, constant and uninterested, reminded them both of the only rules that mattered: cold, distance, endurance, breath. He exhaled and watched it fade. He wished, briefly, that stories could remain unshared without becoming secrets.
A storm finally arrived with a patient fury, first as sifted sugar, then as thick pages torn from a white book. Visibility collapsed until the world ended half a dozen steps out. He and the wolf retreated to denser pines, where branches knitted a dim cathedral, needles whispering a lullaby for the desperate. He built a careful fire, low and tight, feeding it slowly from a hoard of dry twigs rescued from beneath a fallen trunk. The wolf curled so close that their breaths braided, rising in tandem, falling in tandem. Time blurred, measured only by the need to keep flame alive. The storm wrote over everything: tracks, paths, history, insisting on the relief of a blank page. He felt the strange lightness that sometimes follows surrender, a trust not in outcomes, but in their ability to meet whatever walked out of the dark. Morning delivered a silence so complete it rang. The storm had erased even the suggestion of a way back. He stood, legs shaky, and stepped out from the pines to read the new map. No tracks, no wind, just a wide, white field where decisions leave deeper marks. He turned to call the wolf, but space answered instead. The animal was gone. Only a faint hollow in the snow where it had slept remained, already softening under the pale sun. The loss hit with surprising force, not as fear, but as grief for a sentence interrupted. He waited, scanning the edges of trees for a flicker of fur, the tilt of familiar ears. Nothing moved. The forest offered neither explanation nor apology. He adjusted his pack and began walking, one step and then another, carrying quiet like a fragile bowl. An hour pressed by, heavy as wet wool. Cold worked its arithmetic steadily through fingers and feet. He measured progress by breaths, not distance. And then, there, near a broken fence post iced into sculpture, prints. Fresh, deep, unmistakable. The wolf's trail curved from the tree line toward him, then away again in cautious loops, as if mapping the shape of his absence. He followed. Hope kept quiet so it wouldn't frighten. The path led to a shallow depression where tall grass wore helmets of ice. In the hollow center, a narrow bone, gnawed clean, a small sacrifice claimed from scarcity. The gesture rang louder than any howl. The wolf had hunted and returned to the place they'd shared, leaving not a feast, but a sign. Companionship, the wild way, unpromised, unperformed, undeniable.
He set the bone back carefully, a promise to meet halfway. The day turned thinner, color draining to pewter again. He pressed on, edges fraying, vision tunneling to a narrow corridor of steps and breath. Cold slipped beneath his coat and began to slow thoughts. Snow rose in soft eddies with each stumble. He knew this version of exhaustion, the one that wears kindness as costume and whispers that rest is safer than movement. He sank to one knee, then to both, the sky a fading lid. The sound reached him before shape did, snow scuffing under measured paws. The wolf appeared like a piece of the forest rearranging itself into an answer. It approached, close enough that his fingers brushed the coarse warmth of fur. The animal remained, not for food, not for reward, but because the night's arithmetic had changed. Proximity became heat. Heat became time. Time became a chance to continue.
Wind returned with a quiet blade, slicing under clothes and conscience. He leaned into the wolf's presence, drawing breath in shallow pockets. The animal lowered itself beside him, body a living barrier against the cold's relentless will. In that fierce, unspectacular moment, he felt the bond realign beyond currency. No transaction, no taming, only co-survival stitched by recognition. The forest did not soften, it simply allowed them to negotiate with it. He thought of all the labels that might be applied by distant mouths: pet, stray, savior, charity, and felt them fall away, useless tags that fail under the weight of reality. He pushed himself upright, hands on the earth, legs arguing, spine remembering its job. The wolf rose too, mirroring effort with effort, patience with patience. Together, they began to move again, slow as frost forming, sure as dawn considering its return. The horizon cracked with a line of weak gold, enough to outline a service road stitched through trees, forgotten by plows. He recognized salvation not as triumph, but as infrastructure, dull, human, indifferent, exactly what he needed. He and the wolf reached the edge and paused. In another world, he would step out, flag down a vehicle, return to forms and lines and rooms that smelled like detergent and deadlines. In this world, he decided first to honor what had carried him here. He turned to the animal. It met his gaze with the same complicated calm that had unmade his fear and rebuilt his compass. No leash, no promise. Only a shared sentence finally finding its period. He stepped onto the road. The wolf watched a moment longer, then slipped back into the trees, leaving prints that winter would keep for a while, then forgive.